This is the Requiem Metal Podcast, episode 51, Death Part 2.
Every day flows by in the world to corrupt addiction with life. Comes pain, withdrawals, and deformation breaking the mold of human appearance contorting bodies chemical interference. The guilty one, innocent she now cries, life of hell, better off to die. Born without eyes, hands, and half a brain. Be born addicted to cocaine. Living monstrosity, freak for life they'll always be. Never knowing love or hate, only pain the drug creates. She's naive, she's a stupid bitch. Some say to forgive, guilty she should die. The beginning of the end begins at birth, bleeding. Masses twisted, screaming, flesh and example. We should make out of these raiders of misfortune a serious crime that should not be forgiven. The guilty one, innocent she now cries, life of hell, better off to die. Born but eyes, hands, and half a brain. Be born addicted to cocaine.
You just heard Living Monstrosity. Freak for life you'll always be. Never knowing love or hate, only pain the drug creates. I don't know.
You're doing well. It's like freestyle rap here.
It's like MC Hammer,
Yeah. Requiem Metal Podcast. Welcome. This is Jason.
And Mark.
And this is Death Part 2.
Only the middle. We'll have to come up with a clever name for this after production.
We'll have a clever name. The humanizing of death, if you will, where they start to
Death humanizer.
Yeah, exactly. Become more socially conscious of non-kind of horror movie.
Non-zombie issues.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's always good when you can categorize yourself in the non-zombie oriented issues, you know. But it's pretty funny. I just had a fleeting thought there. My kids the other day, there was a zombie reference, and there's apparently a zombie expert in one of my classes, and so we had to like run it past him to know whether or not zombies could.
What did he read the zombie?
Oh, he's read all that, but he's into like the Waking Dead graphic novels and World War Z.
Walking Dead,
yeah, Walking Dead and all that sort of stuff. It's pretty funny because he was very like academic about it. He's like, well, I don't think they'd be able to do that. So it's clever. I don't know. Anyways,
zombies are making a comeback.
Living Monstrosity is not about zombies. In fact, this is the opening track to Spiritual Healing, the third record from Death, which they put out 1990. Yep. And this is a song actually about what's the lyrical content of this all about, Mr. Lyric Man?
A baby being addicted to cocaine.
Yeah. So the crack cocaine, crack babies, the whole like sort of, you know, late 80s, early 90s kind of persona of sort of what the drug culture had become. And
some say she's naive. She's a stupid bitch. Some say to forgive, guilty, she should die.
Wow. So there's Chuck obviously is letting us know where he falls on the front of not only capital punishment but also like the drug laws. So
and abortion and yeah.
So
out of any like death metal record, it's funny. I've listened to this so many times, and it was like one of the first CDs I actually had when I made the big migration over from tapes. So like I actually like read all the lyrics, and I could probably put on the spot probably sing some of them.
Quite a few of them.
Yeah.
I'm kind of that way, I think, with Symbolic and Sound of Perseverance, because I was so like deeply into those records.
Well, and at this age, I was like in 1990. I was probably like 16 years old or something. So this stuff seemed really.
You were unrolling the tape.
Yeah,
unfolding the tape out. Remember how long those could get? When do the double folds and all this crazy stuff. So, yeah, I can. And this is for you a very sentimental record. Obviously, this is sort of your sentimental classic.
My first actual compact disc.
That's pretty fancy.
Yeah, and some say it's not the best Death record, but I think it's as we talked about in the last Death show. What was it, about a month ago or a couple weeks ago now?
It's probably like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah. If you're interested, I mean, you can listen to these in whatever order you want. The Death stuff doesn't necessarily matter. We're just kind of chronicling the entire career of Death because each album is almost kind of a milestone or at least a starting point for another genre or subgenre of metal all throughout the Chuck's entire career.
Sure. And for those of you who didn't hear the last record, the main figure that we'll be kind of talking about is Chuck Schuldiner, who's sort of the centerpiece of Death. And if you want more of the backstory, go back to it's probably like episode 46 or 47, I think.
Something like that, yeah. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can go back and check that out as well.
So just float around our website, requiemmetal.com. Right? Requiempodcast.com. Yeah, sorry. And basically, like, the thing that's going to be interesting about this part 2 of the Death program is that you're going to see probably like the biggest transition take place amongst these two records because we're going to be featuring Spiritual Healing and Human, which fans I think in hindsight really kind of dig Spiritual Healing. I think and I think I was raised in that environment too, like when I was coming up through metal where Spiritual Healing was sort of looked down upon kind of.
Well, and if you look at if you're just a kid in the store looking at covers, Spiritual Healing looks like it could be the sister LP to Warrant.
Yeah.
Dirty Rotten Filthy Stinking Rich. It's that kind of like very 80s looking thrash cover.
It's a pretty awful cover for sure, and
I've come to love it. But
and I love what it represents. Like to me, it means a lot more to me than like the zombies. Sort of the kind of I don't know the televangelist sort of like
it's like, it's a guy in his early 20s
finally, and stuff like that.
Finally like seeing the world around him for what it is and not just this, this completely, foreign, made up, kind of thing.
Exactly. But, the biggest thing, like on a tune like Living Monstrosity, is that, it starts off, it's fast, it's brutal, and, it really kind of links up to what Leprosy was doing, which is the second record that Death did. And then it's sort of that way for like a couple minutes, and then when the solos bust out, you can tell that you're dealing with something, I don't want to say fundamentally completely different, but it's obviously there's been a lot of progress and growth, especially in the playing of Chuck, and then in Chuck bringing in a new guitar player,
James Murphy,
relatively new to the scene, and he'll obviously make a pretty big stamp with not only Death, but he'll go on to Obituary, Cancer.
He was kind of seen as like this uberkind of death metal guitarist, is really kind of virtuoso in the scene when there really wasn't such a thing, except for
Trey.
And really. Trey he's like a force of nature from Morbid Angel, but James Murphy is more of just a very technically proficient player. He's not as he doesn't have the feeling that Chuck usually has in the solos. He's just incredibly technical,
and he plays a lot of, you were noticing, like scales type solo stuff, which we'll hear like when he's doing the solo in Within the Mind. It's just basically kind of all scales and things like that. But it's a pretty interesting record from a lot of ways, and I think it's getting seen through a different light. From what I've sort of read up about it, is that a lot of fans are kind of like, this was critically kind of bashed at the time when it came out, or bashed in hindsight, comparing to like everybody wanted to compare it to Human. It wasn't as technical enough to like compare with the Human stuff, and it wasn't as sort of like brutally traditional kind of classic sounding.
It's a transition record. It's like My Dying Bride, 34% complete or whatever. It's one of those weird transitional records that without that record they wouldn't have got to where they were. Death being the same kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, we were just going back, and I was reading a interview that I had done with Chuck back in like 98, 99 when they were on the Sound of Perseverance tour, and I asked him what he was going to play off Spiritual Healing live, and he's kind of like, nothing, and he said actually Living Monstrosity, if he had a room to fit one song in, would be the song he'd play.
Did they play it or no?
No, they didn't play it, but he said, if we had more room, and if I was to pick one song of Spiritual Healing to play, it'd be Living Monstrosity. So it's weird, so even Chuck sees it maybe as a transitional period, but
that whole kind of, didn't that whole era around that record, wasn't there just a lot of,
I think, and we'll talk more about that later, and I think that's probably just bad memories attached to this record too, I think, and we'll get into some of like the weirdness there, but he's filling the band out with the same guys he had on Leprosy in the rhythm section, which is Terry Butler on bass and Bill Andrews on drums, and obviously you're starting to hear the limitations musically that these guys sort of had, and Chuck even made a comment about that in the interview that we did, and he said, look, but basically I was in a group with like three guys that didn't want to practice and didn't really want to get better.
They're just happy with what they were doing.
Yeah, they were totally like comfortable, And
then Butler went on to 6 Feet Under, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think, did Andrews?
No, we looked that up. It was somebody else, I think. I'm not sure what. Andrews was in Massacre, I believe, at some point.
All three of these guys are Butler,
Andrews, and Cam Lee.
Yeah. So, which we talked about before, but lyrically it's different. Like we said, there's a song which we're gonna play next called "Altering the Future," which is definitely about abortion, and then the title track "Spiritual Healing," which is about this hypocrisy that exists within religion, and I mean, that's a typical theme, but that was a theme you would have heard maybe more in like thrash metal, not so much death metal.
Yeah, so I mean, even like lyrically and cover wise, this reminds me of like a Sacred Reich record.
Well, that and also like I think thematically, it's gonna fit in to sort of some of the stuff that Metallica was doing from Master of Puppets on, and also like that Megadeth was doing on. I don't mean just musically, I also mean like thematically and lyrically. I mean, Dave Mustaine was always very politically astute, and that kind of thing. So, Chuck's trying to like, I don't know if he's like self-conscious about what it means to be sort of like death metal, and he's kind of like going, I need to like, Leprosy and Scream Bloody Gore were great, but I'm like 20. I'm 21 years old now. I'm starting to like get more mature, and I want to kind of move in a different sort of direction and take death metal sort of out of its like, I don't know, out of the crypt, and into like a respectable kind of form, and I really do think that, Chuck was very comfortable with what he was doing, but in between, say, Leprosy, which was 88, and 1990, Spiritual Healing, you know, you got to imagine this is when Altars of Madness and Blessed Are the Sick have come out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Two fundamentally huge records in the Florida death metal scene. So I think it's up the ante for Chuck to, like, you know, really break through with his guitar playing and his singing and the compositional things that he's doing.
Just to kind of, you know, prove the genre is valid. I mean, as valid as thrash, because this was kind of the peak of all the, you know, thrash bands are putting out, you know, like your Seasons in the Abyss and
Rust in Peace.
Rust in Peace. And it was just like, you know, like, and then Persistence of Time from Anthrax. This is kind of the epoch of, you know, these really huge thrash records. And I think he was trying to, you know, bring death metal up from just being this kind of goofy little side thing that people, you know,
kind of, some people laughed at, some people thought was sort of like a car crash scene. You know, it was like,
it was just
cool to stare at for a while, but then it's kind of boring.
Yeah, the scene,
you know?
Nobody thought the scene had any kind of future.
Yeah.
And I think this was one of the earlier bands that actually tried to, you know, spread the wings of the genre a little bit to show what is possible.
And I think he's limited to do that because of the musicians that are surrounding him on this, but I think his dream of wanting to get more into the Injustice for All sort of like progginess is, you know, for those of you who are, I would say probably a lot of you out there who are probably already familiar with Human, you know, Chuck's going to finally get there, you know, and really start to push the envelope in a much huger way. But clearly the dream's alive on this record. It's just, you know, like you said, transitional. You know, it's hard to sort of fit it all together. But, you know, you're already going to see him start to slow down a little bit in the next song that we play, Altering the Future. It's definitely more slow and kind of plotting and things like that. Even the solo is opened up a little bit more than what he's allowed some of the solos to be, you know,
just a flurry of notes before,
and you can already start to hear, in my opinion, you can hear a lot more progginess on a song like Altering the Future.
And there's you hear a lot more of the Middle Eastern kind of scales, you know, thrown into this as well.
Especially like the stuff he does like in Spiritual Healing, like kind of in the middle. Some of the solos are pretty, you know, pretty awesome. So the next two tunes we're going to hear, Altering the Future and Spiritual Healing, these I'd say are probably the two best known songs probably on this record.
Because they're on the Fate tape, right?
Because they were on the Fate tape, exactly. And that's why I know them.
Those of you who don't remember, there was a Death best of. When did that come out? In the mid-90s, like 93, 94?
Actually came out before Individual Thought Patterns, I think.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, so like 92.
Okay, I think
so right after Human.
I never got it because it didn't have anything different than the albums I already had.
Why would you? You know,
it had god awful cover, which I think I talked about last episode.
I think it's purple blue or something like that.
Yeah, it's just looked
with like silhouettes of the band or something. It's really bad. I think it was one of those records. Like I think you mentioned, just fulfill a contract, just kind of get done and go somewhere else.
Goodbye Combat.
But Spiritual Healing, the second tune we're going to hear here. This is sort of it's the centerpiece of the whole record. First of all, I mean, it's the middle of the record. It's the epic song. It's the longest song, clearly by 3 minutes. Not only the record, it's 7:44, so it's almost 8 minutes long, and it's really just
it's the longest thing they've done up to that point.
Yeah, and it's
by far.
Actually, it'll be the longest thing they do until I think the last song on Symbolic, which I can't remember what that song's called. Not Crystal Mountain. It goes Crystal Mountain, Misanthrope, and then I can't remember. But anyways, the closing track on Symbolic is also pretty long, and then basically all of Sound of Perseverance is long. But what's cool about this, and we were mentioning, this is the same year that Scott Burns, who produced this record, Morris Sound Studios, this is sort of when, like, you know, Cause of Death had come out.
Yeah.
There was all this stuff that was starting to kind of come out of Florida, and even Napalm Death from England came over in 1990 to record
Harmony Corruption.
Harmony Corruption, which was kind of turned out to be more of a death metal record because of that.
But it's still, that was almost the great divisor with fans at the time.
I love it.
I think it's fantastic.
But the centerpiece of Harmony Corruption is a song that Napalm always plays like near the end. It's kind of the crowd pleaser. Just Suffer the Children.
Yeah.
And Suffer the Children is like this giant like tantric exercise in like repetitive like, I don't know, repetitive verses and things like this, all building towards the
great
huge,
Celtic Frost breakdown.
Huge breakdown. And Spiritual Healing feels like the same way. It's almost like 3.5-4 minutes, all building towards like Chuck's like evil growl and like the practice what you preach, you know, which like that's, you call it the mosh part. You know,
it's like it's almost
total release. You know, of metal energy.
This was also, I think, the time that DSP was putting the F. Scott Burns stickers or whatever on the
cleanliness
back
and the sort of clinical sound that was coming out of Florida.
Yeah, that was kind of a funny,
because Burns was also doing like Sepultura at this time, you know, Death, Obituary, Napalm Death. I mean,
Suffocation, a lot of that stuff.
I mean, just everything was kind of coming out of the Morris sounds.
Yeah, I guess compared to what things are now, it wasn't corporate or commercial at all. But you know, for back in the cult black metal scene.
Yeah, well, and even the cult death metal scene, I think, you know, you talk about like bands like Incantation that was sort of wanted to reject that clean sound and be like murky and dirty, and even Autopsy to some extent was like kind of, you know, middle finger to all this.
Yeah, pretty much.
That, and they just wanted to do a lot of drugs, I think.
They're just lazy from everything I've read.
Pretty lazy. So, but anyways, let's get to some more spiritual healing here. We've got Altering the Future, and then of course the aforementioned title track.
giving and taking of life flows me. Always locking the doors to your mind, escaping reality that surrounds you, using fame an excuse to kill. A sick way of life is now revealed. All the prayers in the world can help you now. A killer and taker of life is what you are. Speak no more lies. It's your turn to die. idiocy has drinking your mind. A real life hell you will find. All the breaths in the world can't help you now. A killer, a taker of life is what you are. Speak no more lies. It's your turn to die.
That was Spiritual Healing and Altering the Future. And we're going to kind of close things up here a little bit with Spiritual Healing in a moment. And we're going to play a song which, I don't know, I guess I would sort of throw out there as being maybe the most forward-thinking song on the record for some odd reason, which is Within the Mind. Because I guess it has like a real meat and potatoes feel to it for like a lot of the song.
Yeah.
But then the solo is very kind of open, improvisational, a lot of scaling and different things like that. It's probably the most progressive thing that they kind of do probably on the whole record in a way. And to me, it's very predictive of not only Human, but it sounds almost like a demo version of the stuff that you'll hear after Human, which is Individual Thought Patterns, which is a more like kind of
it's a record. That record for me it's just there.
It's odd.
Good. It doesn't. It's not one I always want to pull out. It's either going to be Human or going to be symbolic.
Symbolic. Yeah, you're right. And it's like when I force myself to sit down and get into Individual Thought Patterns, I suddenly I always have these moments of like I get why this record's sweet, but then it's a very and I don't want to talk too much about it. Right? It's subtle and it's also like it's just disconnected. Energy wise, like Human is like so fast, which we're going to hear in a moment. It's like energetic and just
we've
punchy.
Got what is it, Sean Reinhardt?
Yeah, Reinhardt
on drums, and then we go to Gene Hoglan on Individual Thought Patterns, which he's totally two different kinds of players, and Sean's got an unbelievable intensity and energy to his playing.
Exactly, and Hoglan's more like he's used to bashing.
Yeah,
and I think Chuck maybe didn't know how to use them. I don't know. That kind of thing, and then he kind of really figures out how to use Hoglan well on Symbolic, where like their styles all sort of fit together. So I think maybe part of it's change of personnel. Andy LaRocque, you've got all these guys from just kind of different eras coming in, but plus I think
LaRocque only played on the record, never toured with him.
Yeah, that's true. But Chuck was really kind of, I think, thinking consciously on that record of like, I think really wanting to be not considered death metal.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was like his, and I think when you walk in with that thought, it kind of like traps you a little bit rather than writing more naturally, which I feel like Symbolic and Sound of Perseverance will come across as like more organic in nature. Mm-hmm. You know, Individual Thought Pattern sounds constructed in a way, you know. But
yeah.
Anyways, we'll get to that later. I don't want to get, you know, we're getting to part 3 already, man. But yeah,
a teaser, just a taste.
Within a Mind it's a cool tune, and we had kind of flirted with the idea. I'm sure we'll disappoint some of the hardcore spiritual healing fans because this is the last song we're gonna play. You know, we were gonna play Low Life, but then we decided to squeeze in Vacant Planets instead, and kind of limit the length of the music down by a few minutes by doing so.
Get a little more conversation, because that's what some of you listeners have said they want more of.
A little more talk, a little, you know,
a little less action, I guess.
A little less action, a lot more conversation. So, was that the opposite of the Elvis song, right? Which is a little more. Anyways, Within a Mind will bleed into a pairing of songs from Human, and we'll just sort of introduce them a little bit with a couple of the concepts that you'll be kind of listening for. But Suicide Machine in particular has like a real sort of standard drive to it. It's not like it's not going to be the most different song that you'll hear on Human. It's very like, it's still like kind of in the traditional death metal kind of roots and stuff like that.
It's really plotting, but it has enough room to breathe and swing a little bit, like a lot of this record does, which is kind of bizarre for death metal to do that.
So definitely, as you're listening to this, listen to the transition from Within a Mind to Suicide Machine. If you've never heard, you know, these death records before and you're kind of unfamiliar, kind of real pay attention to like the use of time signatures and the role of the bass. And then also the drumming,
yeah,
you know,
from Andrews to Reiner, it's like night and day.
I think you know you'll hear that sort of thing real apparently. And if you don't hear it on Suicide Machine, then you got to be kind of deaf or dumb if you don't hear it on the last song. We play Secret Face, which is all over the map. So, and we'll talk more about Secret Face, I guess, when we come back, and kind of the role that Human played and why it's so important. So. Enjoy our closing number from Spiritual Healings, Within a Mind, and the introduction of their next phase with Human and Suicide Machine and Secret Face.
Transforming your life from the inside out, overcoming fear that made you down, serving what is stored in the subconscious, trusting what you feel with your gut response. See past the dark and use your energy. Look from these images, thoughts that we call dreams. Was to come in future time, avoiding pain and misery.
That was Secret Face and Suicide Machine from Human, and then of course we started things off with Within the Mind. And Human, obviously Mark mentioned before, a different lineup, right? we're talking.
Oh yeah,
about,
we've got Paul Masvidal, Sean Reinhart, and Steve DiGiorgio.
Yeah, maybe these are names. Those of you who are kind of old school death metal fans, or even prog metal fans, will kind of be familiar with.
The Cynic crew.
Yeah, really, the Cynic crew. This is kind of half of Cynic has joined Death at this point.
And then DiGiorgio is what in Sadist before
Sadist, yeah. And DiGiorgio will play on this in Individual Thought Patterns. So...
Yep, that's it.
And then, DiGiorgio is sort of like a hired gun once Sadist kind of takes hiatus for a while.
The guy kind of just disappeared as far as I know.
Who's that, DiGiorgio?
Yeah, I haven't really seen him on much of anything.
Last thing I can think about him being on was Testament stuff, which was...
oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
He was on The Gathering. Pretty sure.
So that would have been... The Gathering came out right about after the time of...
It was 99, Testament, The Gathering, because Lombardo was on drums.
That was quite a few years after Individual Thought Patterns.
Yeah. And then there was... Sadist, made a comeback, in the early 2000s. I think they, put another record out or something.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what it was like. But anyways, DiGiorgio is sort of known as the he's kind of one of the jazz bassists kind of guys.
He was one of the first death metal bassists to play fretless, to finger pick with his hands and just play non-conventional.
Kind of like Steve Harris or Cliff Burton style, that sort of approach to bass playing.
And with the lineup change, we also see a change in the Death logo.
Yes,
we lose the spider web, the spider, the dripping blood. And I think that's about it.
We've still got
we keep the Grim Reaper head.
Still got Evil Skull, Grim Reaper head, and the Evil Sickle. So, but things are obviously progressing, both musically and artistically. The covers definitely changed as well. It's very, I don't know. It's kind of just got an artsy feel to it more. You could definitely tell.
It almost looks like
a
Carcass Heartworks single,
or
something. It's got that weird hybrid of anatomy with. Just this textured kind of background. It's probably one of my favorite covers of theirs.
Sure, and it's definitely a defining. I think when you look at you look at the imagery of Death and the fact that they've sort of simplified their logo. It's a little less teenagey, kind of horror movie type stuff. They've gone away from the Warrant covers of old of Spiritual Healing. To me, it's what this record sort of speaks is classiness all over the place. Classy musicians who
this is the age of even artistically, when Dave McKean was doing Paradise Lost and My Dying Bride covers, and we saw this was kind of the rise of computer graphics with as far as graphic design went for albums too. So this was kind of a big. Everybody could kind of step up to their A game. It wasn't all about paintings anymore. Sure,
and it says the artwork's by René Mivel, so I bring in a foreign French artist of some sort, but this is again mastered by Scott Burns, comes out in 91, and now it's kind of being licensed through Relativity. So I don't know much about Relativity as a record label. I think they were part of Combat for a while, weren't they? Combat
Relativity. I think Combat was more of the metal side of Relativity, and I think this was kind of I could be completely wrong, but this is just my gleaning over the years that I've picked up Relativity records.
So I think they're trying to maybe mainstream these guys a little bit more.
It was Atlantic and Megaforce or something like that, I think.
And I think there was a real conscious attempt to market this record to kind of a different audience, a more intellectual audience probably. And I think that's because what you heard there on Secret Face is you're talking about, a new complexity. This is after And Justice for All has come out, after Rust in Peace has come out, these sort of complex thrash metal prog masterpieces. And I think Chuck's really upping his game, and he's brought in musicians. If you're unfamiliar with Cynic, Cynic a couple years later, in I think 92 or 93, are going to put out Focus, which has gotten a lot of attention along with the first kind of two Atheist records for kind of introducing jazz metal or jazz death metal, prog metal kind of stuff to the masses. I know Cynic was a really influential album on myself and Grindcore Coon.
I hate the record, but it's only because of the vocals.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I talked about this before, but we had a previous cut of it that had death vocals on it. And then when I got the CD, I was just kind of come on, really vocoder through the whole damn thing?
Yeah.
So,
it's definitely one that Mark's never been able to embrace.
It adds too much of a Dream Theater element to that record where I just can't get into it. So,
and to me, we did talk about it when we talked about Obscura, because Obscura did kind
of vocoder right as far as my aesthetic. But.
And the funny thing is that even though this is so proggy and stuff like that, you know, I was looking back in this interview that we did with Chuck, and Chuck's talking about like how everybody started to accuse him of you know, copying what Atheist did, and he claims like, dude, I don't own Atheist, I wasn't into Atheist, you know. And I can almost see that, having gone back and really thought about this record, that I think Chuck really was coming from more of an Injustice for All. You know, like that's what was influencing him, not like a bunch of his contemporaries in death metal. Like he was looking way beyond death metal into like.
Well, yeah, and Chuck's career follows more of an arc, and Atheist is pretty much a straight line as far as they've always done this from the get go. Yeah. This is what they do. Chuck's more of he's progressing through. That's almost like an obvious next step. Okay, if you do the most complex stuff you can on you know, spiritual healing, what's the next step up?
Yeah.
Okay, the first like rudimentary thing of. Yeah, that I think of with prog is the stop-start stuff, you know, the really quick kind of jarring riffs and stuff like that. And then after you get that, after you kind of master that thing, you go on to the time signature, which they end up, actually they kind of do tackle this a little bit on this record.
Yeah, they do a lot of time signature sort of stuff going on here. And I think, you know, maybe, you know, what you could argue, and also Chuck also said, look, I wasn't like trying to make like a jazz record. I don't really listen to much jazz. It wasn't really in my conception. What he wanted to make was a complex metal record, you know. And I think what you could argue is that, I know in the liner notes that you know, Reinhardt and Masvidal both thank Roger Patterson, who was the dead bassist of Atheist, who was a big influence musically. I'm sure those guys were raised on Atheist, and so
I think they were raised on Atheist and Death.
Yeah, and so
they're always kind of like, they're grateful to be in the band.
Exactly, and so like they're bringing that to the table, and even though Chuck's not an Atheist fan, it's obviously there a little bit, you know. And if you're unfamiliar with Atheist, you know, go out and get Unquestionable Presence or Piece of Time, and you know, I mean, those are just great records, you know. And if you're into this style of music,
pretty soon after this podcast, they're going to be playing at the Maryland Death Fest.
Oh yeah, we're going to be seeing them.
That should be sweet.
It's going to be good.
And they have the good sense not to put out a new record. They just keep playing their old material like Carcass. That's the way to do it, like at the gates.
Exactly.
We don't need a new record. If anything, give us a live record. I can deal with that. I don't want to hear half-ass songs.
Exactly. And really the last thing Atheist gave us with Elements was pretty hit or miss. It was pretty rotten record.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've heard that.
There's like 3 or 4 decent songs. The rest is pretty like...
That's kind of Pestilent Spheres kind of...
Yeah, but I that's kind of dissing on Pestilent Spheres a little bit. I think Spheres is a little more interesting.
Yeah, it's been
listenable. So
12 or 15 years since I've listened to that record.
That's right. It happens. What you hear, like, it's funny, like on Suicide Machine though, and this is why I kind of go back to the fact that I think Chuck really probably wasn't paying any attention to Atheist. You know, there's such a shortest straw Metallica and Justice for All riff.
Oh, they're totally
right in that song, you know. And there's a really swinging rhythm too, which I don't know if he's kind of like trying to get that from the whole thrash metal kind of swing and groove, or the Iron Maiden swing and groove, or
on the drums or the bass.
Just in general in the rhythm section, you know?
Yeah, because the drums for me, I mean, it really sounds like old, like Art Blakey, you know, kind of standard jazz stuff, except instead of just having the bass drum hit, you know, every like third note or whatever, he's going like 160 beats a minute double bass.
Yeah.
And then just doing this more kind of off time stuff that
with the cymbal works and stuff like that. And you know, DiGiorgio is obviously, you're hearing bass clear for the first time on this, you know, like even like in the build up in Suicide Machine, you know, you can hear like him slapping a little bit.
Yeah, and it's pulling. From what I can remember I've listened to Atheist recently, but the bass never jumped out at me as big as, you know, everybody was always, you know, a huge fan of the bass on the record. But what DiGiorgio does on this record, how he plays around notes, he doesn't play along with drums or anything. It's just really interesting. Like, it's just like accenting what's going on.
Yeah, and that was
very jazz-like.
Sure, absolutely. And so I think there's a looseness to the musical approach to it, but yet this by far is the tightest record that Chuck's put together.
Yeah.
I mean, every song there's no song that's over, I think, 4 minutes and 20 seconds, and it feels like there's 10 to 15 more ideas per song than anything you've heard on the previous 3 records, which all had songs that were like 4 or 5 records. Yeah. You're not hearing the meat and potato stuff so much. He's like, he kind of cut a lot of the meat and potatoes. Like, he gives you enough of the sort of standard, like, death riffs to sort of groove you into the songs, but then he's going to stop and do, like, 10 time signatures and go do a solo here and then, you know. but it's very listenable, and that I think that's the part that Human doesn't get enough credit for. And we talked about this with Obscura. When you're doing a technical death metal record, it's got to be like, you got to be able to penetrate it.
It's got to, you're gonna like. It's got to have equal parts, catchiness, and then like a little bit of difficulty to wrap your head around certain ideas. But I mean, music's for the most part is it's something that you try to find patterns in. If it's completely arbitrary, I mean that unless that's your point. If you're doing something like free jazz Faust or something, but
Cecil Taylor, something like that.
Yeah, but this is clearly not that. This is this is a death metal record, and I think there's a certain level or there's a certain amount of that prog nature that needs to, or that's going to be in there. But you've got to have a certain amount of melody,
and you got to rein all that stuff. Think about
song structures, and people don't at this point. We weren't really doing like 9-10 minute long prog death metal opuses or anything. This is way before that,
pre-Opeth.
Yeah.
And so like a song like Suicide Machine is just a great song.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's catchy, it's sing along. It's all the things technical, that you want.
It's like something people could totally like mosh to as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, the record works on a lot of different levels.
I think that if there was one record that all Death fans could agree on, it's probably Human.
Yeah.
I mean, I really
unless they're really super old school guys that think Scream Bloody Gore is where it's at, but
that's what I mean. I think even the old school guys could almost find the heaviness of Human to be pleasant enough that they could get into, whereas like they're not going to get into individual thought patterns, and they're probably going to be too perplexed, and I think Symbolic's too melodic, and Sound of Perseverance is too long. Like they can't, no one could wrap their heads around.
Sound of Perseverance, not to get on a tangent, but has some of the best drum production.
Oh, it's freaking amazing.
Love that.
Yeah,
stuff
the
that
Richard Christie stuff. Yeah. But I'm saying like this is the all-star death record for I think most people, because even if Leprosy was not technical enough for you, Human's going to do it for you, and most Leprosy fans liked Human. Most Scream Bloody Gore fans liked Human. Mm-hmm. But this also, I think, attracted people that maybe weren't into like the bludgeoning kind of death metal style,
Yeah.
This was a record you could probably have thrown on for musicians, non-metal musicians or non-death metal musicians.
They're open-minded enough.
And it would have gained a little bit of respect. They would have said, these guys kind of know what they're doing, musically. So... But anyways, there's a lot of different things kind of happening on there. Secret Face had those badass like pinch harmonics that really had like the My Dying Bride. I mean, My Dying Bride was probably listening to this record.
Oh yeah, and pinch harmonics. That's like another level on the scale of not necessarily of progness, but of guitar maturity.
Sure.
Because I've been messing around with guitar for years now. I don't play very well, but I have mastered doing the pinch harmonic, which I play the hell out of. And if I was doing like a solo or something, I'd definitely be throwing those things in.
Sure. Sorry, I was just distracted by the industrial factory outside of our town. We're recording this live from Birmingham, England.
Oh yeah.
Trying to get in the death metal, the metal spirit of the moving machines and factories and things like that. But the next set we're going to hear is a pretty tight set of music. We're going to open with the Flattening of Emotion, which is the opener for Human, which really informs you where you're at with like sort of just the building like drum patterns and rhythmic patterns and stuff like that, and then they sort of start to build like all the music kind of into it a little bit, and really pay attention to the cymbal work. I mean, it's very gentle, it's very like eloquent stuff that they're doing.
Well,
the drums
and the drum beat, or the drum, basically the one constant throughout the entire record is the same like incredibly fast double bass patterns, and he's like where Andrews, that was his only place where he really showed any kind of variation was in his double bass
doing
patterns.
A little double bass
stuff, he could do like some Lars kind of stuff from Metallica once in a while, like a little bit of one kind of thing, but Reinhardt just plays that consistently through like balls out top speed, and
then accentuates
with everything else. Like sometimes you're not even hitting a snare. It's just like this texturing of cymbals and stuff. So really good stuff.
It's a pretty cool tune. And then Together as One, which is I don't even know, like it's just a great tune. I don't know. There's nothing that stands out about it as being like totally special, but it's, I don't know, to me it's like really representative. It fits right there,
and it fits great with the flow of the record. It's like, Rain of Blood, you take any one song out, it kind of ruins the flow.
Exactly. And then one of Mark's favorite tunes, and a tune like it's funny, like I think when I listen to Human sometimes I get through like the first 6 or 7 songs and don't always make it to the last tune on this record, which is unfortunate. That's Vacant Planets. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. We're going to hear Cosmic Sea first, then end with Vacant Planets. But we'll talk more about what's going on in Cosmic Sea, which is an instrumental. We haven't done a Death instrumental yet, but there's some cool things happening here. And if you've ever wondered what Cynic kind of sounds like, I think you're going to get a sense of it from part of what's going on in Cosmic Sea, this instrumental, because it really informs of what's happening. And then we'll close things out with Vacant Planets. So enjoy a foursome here from Death Human. All right, that was Vacant Planets, Cosmic Sea, Together as One, and open things up with Flattening of Emotion. And Vacant Planets is a really cool tune. Hey, creature, get out of here. Being attacked by creatures. Alley cats. Yeah, alley cats in Birmingham with industrial factories. It gets pretty rough. But the song in particular that I wanted to mention real quick before we kind of close things out is Cosmic Sea, which was the instrumental where you get the trade-off between the two guitar players and stuff. And when I interviewed Chuck, I asked him if he'd ever consider playing like an instrumental like that or Voice of a Soul from Sound of Perseverance Live. And he said, there's no way we could do that because of the like studio trickery. He goes, we like recorded like 3 or 4 different like guitar parts and we're blending them all together,
looping it all
and doing a lot of
a little ganj.
Copious amounts of drugs when they were kind of doing that. And they even played like some of the stuff like backwards tape loops and different things. So it's kind of neat to hear, you know, Death go into such experimental territory so quickly, especially from kind of the plotting stuff that you hear like on Leprosy and Spiritual Healing, you know, a year or two before. And then Vacant Planets really, you know, has some stunningly progressive, technical, kind of almost psychedelic kind of soloing stuff going on for it. But we're going to close things off with probably the most recognized tune, probably along with Suicide Machine from this record, the hit single, if you will, Lack of Comprehension. This is probably the one I listen to the most just because it's 3.5 minutes of just sort of like bliss glory, you know. If anyone was to ask me like what a quintessential Death song sounded like in under 4 minutes, I'd probably play him.
Low Life?
What's Low Life? Yeah, I'd play him Evil Dead, you know, Mutilation, you know. But Lack of Comprehension is just, it's tight, and the stop-start stuff is probably at its best here.
It's done to good effect. It's not just done just because they can.
Exactly. But yeah, tell us what you think. You know, if there's a Death song that we missed, or you know, personal favorite, if we played the right ones in your opinion, and tried to capture the spirit of this very middle era of Death. You know, I mean, Human is sort of a career highlight for most bands, and it's really just the stepping stone to a couple, I think, of bigger places that Death's going to go before they're all kind of done.
Yeah, well, before Chuck's done.
But yeah, before unfortunately Chuck's done. But anyhow, send us an email at requiempodcast@gmail.com, or you can drop us a line at TalkShoe or iTunes.
Or visit our website, requiempodcast.com.
Yeah, we keep forgetting, but yeah, there's some comments on there, comment pages. Just click on, drop a comment.
Yep, start every some controversy. You can either yell at us or say, hey, that was cool, or I want something different.
Yeah, and plus we're going to have some links up there, right?
We've always got links in the show notes. If you'd like to help the show out financially, you could buy any of the albums through our Amazon affiliate account, which helps us pay for web hosting and whatnot. And
so if you don't have Human or Spiritual Healing, this is a good time to,
this would be a great
go
time.
out and round out the Death collection a little bit.
And get them used at a reasonable rate.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, here's Lack of Comprehension for you, so enjoy. For Requiem Metal Podcast, I'm Jason.
And I'm Mark. You're the true one in mind.